Hi guys, this is Nadia from Embellic Crafts, and today I want to show you how to create this wire woven pendant. If you like those gorgeous stones, I have just launched a kit to go with this tutorial, so pop over to my website and have a look if any of the variations appeal to you. Don't forget to subscribe. Right, let's get started. So to begin with, we need to cut our base wires, and we are going to line them up so that they sit on top of each other like that. And then we are going to cut a short piece of our half round wire, and what we're going to do is kind of wrap the half round wire around the middle of the wires that are going to be the base of our pendant. So you can use, if you do not have half round, you can obviously use round as well, or you can even weave the base if that's easier for you. I just like the half round profile because it's nice, it looks pretty, and it also gives you good grip. So when doing the wraps, just make sure that you have an uneven number, because when you're bending, and it's just something that I do, and I've seen other people do it as well, because when you bend at an angle, you always have one extra wrap that will sit at the base, if that makes any sense. I hope it does. And when trimming off the wires, just make sure that you both trim them off on the same side so that they sit on the inside. So next we're going to put a bend like that, and you can see why I want to have an uneven number. It's just something, I think it looks better when you have an uneven number. So this next bit is a little bit fiddly with the stone being sideways, so to speak. So you'll have to take your time with that. What we're going to do is basically take the wires and wrap the wires around the stone to create a shape that will sort of hug the stone, if that makes sense. We're going to bend these around, and because you've got multiples, it'll be a little bit fiddly, so take your time. So just adjust as you go along. Oops. So just pop that back in, and just you know, take your time, as I said, and try not to rush it, otherwise it'll go all pear-shaped. So after a little bit of fiddling, I have got the shape as well. So what we're going to do next is cut a longer piece of our half round. So once again, we need to wrap the wire around all of the wires to keep it in place. First, we're going to attach a little tail to one side to give it a little bit of an anchor point. And then we are wrapping a couple of times, or that's South African for several. I don't think you say that in other parts of the world for the same. So a few times around the base. And then we're going to separate out the two front wires, the two wires that are most at the front, and these are going to become our bell. So here we are. These are the two wires at the front, and what we're going to do is take the half round wire and we're going to wrap it around. So I'm adjusting the frame as I go along, just to make sure that everything is parallel to each other. Next, it's also a little bit fiddly at this stage because the wires are fairly long, so they tend to get in the way a little bit, especially with the overhead camera. They keep dinging the camera, so it gets in the way. So, but you can see here what you're supposed to do, and that is what the bell looks like. So next we're going to bend the leftover wires on the outside away. We're going to be using those later. We're going to shape the bell first, so put a little bit of a bend in it, and you can actually trim off the excess wire. I don't know why I didn't. I left it throughout the tutorial. I just never know if I'm going to reuse a wire, so I'm always reluctant to cut it off because I tend to just reuse wire sometimes I don't. For this design you can actually cut it off if you want, because I haven't actually used it, so just cut it. And we're going to use the legs of the bell to wrap around the frame. Now be careful when you do that. You don't want to pull too much, otherwise you're going to bunch up the wires at the top, and obviously you don't want to. You want to make sure they sit flat next to each other, if that makes sense. So just once or twice is enough, and obviously do that the same thing with the other side. Just enough to anchor it, and then flatten it out. Just keep adjusting the frame, and that's what it looks like. So I've kept those wires for now, and I'm going to grab the wires on the right, 2 of those, and feed them up around the bell. And this just brings them up so that I have got some wires that I can use to weave next to the bell, because I want to create some detail there. So I'm feeding them through, and I very gently pull them tight, and I use my thumb here. You can see I push the loop, which kind of helps guide the wire through the bell. And then I just pull up apart. As you have to try, because this is square wire, you have to try and keep it as straight as possible, which sometimes is not easy. So, you know, if it goes a little bit twisted, you'll just have to untwist it, basically. So just pay attention to that. It's not as difficult with round wire, obviously, because there's no corners. So square wire in that sense is harder to work with. So what we're doing next is just a very simple 2x5 weave. So it's 5 times around the base wire, and then twice around both wires at the same time. Again, because the wire is square, the weaving isn't quite as smooth, so I find I have to push my weave together as I go along. So then I do this again. So the 2x5 weave basically is just 5 times around the base and then twice around both wires, and that's a repetition after that. Good practice weave as well if you use that, if you haven't done any weaving before, because it helps you to get used to the way wire feels. Just use your pliers, and again my trusty bent nose pliers. It's a tool that I use all the time, just because it gives you a different leverage. There you go, we continue. So I've created 12 sets of this, and what we're going to do now is shape this weave. So we're going in an anti-clockwise motion, like so, and we're going to travel all the way down to the stone, to the side of the stone. Just shape it until you're happy, and we're going to kind of stop midway and attach one of the wires to the frame. So we're just going to go through an open area of that frame, and we're going to feed this wire through. Now admittedly, I have to say that this sort of frame isn't great for busy weaves, because there aren't any attachment points. So if you want to create something that has got a lot of weaves, it's better to create a different type of frame. So that's what it looks like so far. So next we're going to create the same weave again. We're going to bring the wire we've attached to the frame back in line, and we're going to repeat exactly what we did in the first. It doesn't really matter what you start with, 2s first or the 5 wraps first, doesn't really matter. Same weave again. So we just continue with that, and we've got 15 sets this time. So I am going to go this time in a clockwise motion to get the bend right. Sorry, I'm out of shot here, kind of traveled out of the picture, but really sorry about that. Happens sometimes because I can't really see where my head is, so I've twisted it, and this is anti-clockwise, and it's just going around the side of the stone, and we are going to use the leg again to attach. So that's what it looks like so far. And next we're going to Open this up. So I needed to add a few more weaves. Now the 15 weaves that I've told you that I have added already account for this, so don't add any more. You should be able to reach, if you have the same size stone, you should be able to reach to where I intended the weave to be, so don't add any more. I just had to add because mine weren't 15, I had something like 12 or so I had to add. So there we go. Just trying to do this as quickly as possible, so that I think for you watching me do this is like watching paint dry. So I try and keep my tutorials short and to the point, but I just had to add some more weaves in at this stage. So that's what it looks like, and I think this is okay now, so I'm going to attach it to the frame. So find a space near the bottom somewhere. There you go. So just pull that through. And once again, just adjust until you're satisfied. That's what it looks like. So next we are going to create some detail on the side. So I'm taking the two weaving wires, the two base wires, sorry, on the side, and once again we're going to create some more 2x5 weaves. So we haven't used any different type of weaving in this pendant, so it's really simple, very repetitive. So take the two wires at the top, and we are going to do once again 2x5 weave. So just take your time. It's always a little bit fiddly when you're closer to the frame because you really got no real grip and space to work with, so it's always a little bit more fiddly than when you're further along where you can grip the wires properly. So just use my pliers to usually just push the weaves down when I have done a little bit of progress, like so. And then we'll just continue, create the sets we need. So I've got 12 sets, and we are going to shape this to run alongside the pendant. So again, I'm going in a clockwise motion and I'm kind of laying it alongside the first weave to kind of create flow. So that's what it looks like. You can always adjust the weaves at a later stage once they're attached, and you know, always come back and do little adjustments here and there. So that's very possible. So if they don't fit properly, you don't like the look, you can always come in and readjust. So once again, we're going to attach this to the frame. So feed this through. And then press. So that's what it looks like so far. We've attached it. And as I said, a different frame would be better for this because the attachment points aren't great. So in retrospect, the next one I'm going to do is going to be a different frame. It works for this one, but it's not as good as it would be with a constructed frame. So once again, we're going to make a 2x5 weave. Same process. So adjust. And we're just going to continue until we've got enough weave. So what I'm doing here is actually adjusting the height of one of the wires so that they sit perfectly parallel to each other. It just makes the weaving easier and it looks neater as well. There you go. And then we continue. So I've got my 5 sets here. Sorry, 12, not 5. And again, we are twisting. and we are shaping it. So this was a clockwise twist, and we are now going to attach the wire coming from underneath behind basically and feeding one of the legs through the frame. So the top wire will come through the frame and attach. So pull the wire through and just give it 1 or 2 wraps until you're satisfied that it's secure. And that's what it looks like so far. So next, I'm adjusting one of the wires that's sitting a little bit lower than the first with my pair of pliers. So I'm just giving it a 90-degree bend basically to bring it up in line. Again, that makes it look a lot neater. So you see me attach wires, weaving wires as we go along. So I always use roughly about 100 centimeters. So I reuse a lot of the weaving wire. I say, you know, cut 100 centimeters and attach it, but if you still have wire left, you don't need to do that. So basically only just ever add in when you feel it's necessary. Usually 100 centimeters lasts for about, how much is that? It lasts for about 1 or 2 sets of these weaves. So you should have plenty. Just add in whenever you need. So once again, 2 wraps. And then we continue. So we've got 7 sets here, and we are going in an anti-clockwise motion just to create a little bit of detail there at the bottom. And this is a very organic design as well. So if you wanted to change something, you can just add a couple of more weaves, or, you know, place a wire in a different area or so. So it's quite open to interpretation, and you can change a lot of things to make it look different. I quite like seeing that when I get photos sent of pieces that people have made and they look different. I really like to see all the variations. So that's the nice thing about weaving. Nothing is really set in stone. So that's what it looks like. And as always, you can come back in and readjust if you're not entirely happy. So I've just brought it through, and again, I've got some more weaving wire. I don't think I've added some in there. I had some left over. So again, if you need to add in, do that. Otherwise, just reuse leftover wire. So once again, trusty 2x5. And see, this part's easier to create here because the wires are much easier accessible. Push the weaves in a bit and then continue with the weave. So we've got enough here. Once again, 12 sets. So always fold the weave up a tiny bit to make it easier to create the swirl. Because depending on how the wire is put at an angle, the swirls look different. So maybe practice a little bit and find out what sort of setting creates what type of look. It's quite fun actually, because there's many different variations. So next we fold the wire through and we bring it through near the frame. And we'll bring it through underneath one of the weaves. Should be quite open and airy, so you shouldn't have any problems to bring the wires through. There we go. And then just adjust and attach. So that's what it looks like so far. Next, you can see the wires are getting a little bit bent out of shape as you go, and especially the square wires don't look pretty when you work with them. So I've trimmed off some remainder of the weaving wire, and I'm going to tuck away the wires that we've just attached. And you can see here exactly why these kind of frames aren't actually great for that sort of design, because all the wires you need for tucking away weaving wires are pressed against the stone. So there isn't much room and the frame easily bends out of shape. So basically a constructed frame would be a lot better. And also I think the backing for this doesn't look quite as neat as I would like it to be. So you can, at a later stage, if you find the same, maybe cover it up with like a sort of type of bale weave or so to hide the ugly bits at the back. The front's quite pretty, but the back on this one is a little bit messy. So that's what it looks like. So once again, if you need more weaving wire, just add some in, otherwise just reuse if you still got some left. And then again, it's a trusty 2x5, so just twice around both wires and 5 times around the base wire. So we're just continuing with that and adjust, and just try and keep the wires from twisting, the square wires from twisting. They always have a tendency to do that. As I said, round wires are much easier in that sense. So just continue until you've got all the sets you need. So that's what we have created. So once again, we're going to follow the initial shape, and we create the detail on the side here, and again that's open for interpretation, so you can change it around if you find a better way that looks nicer than this. So very easily changed. So that's what it looks like. And then I'm going to run it alongside. You want to cover, as you go along, you want to cover as much of the vulnerable areas of the stone, because it's quite exposed, once again, to do with the frame. So you want to cover any open areas where the stone may hit a surface or so, to protect it. You don't want it to get damaged. So the more wire you can put over the edges, the better. So once again, feeding it through the frame. So find an area where you can attach these wires, all the while being careful not to distort the frame too much, which frankly is quite difficult with this, because you will distort the frame. That will happen. Just make sure that the stone is still securely set. So that's what it looks like, and then just adjust it until you're satisfied with the way it looks and satisfied that the stone is fully secure. And then trim it off. Now there's always many ways. You don't actually have to cut the wires off. You can bring them back into the design and create some more detail with it until the wire runs out. That's the way I tend to do my pieces. I don't really like adding in if I don't have to, so I reuse wires as much as possible. So that's what it looks like so far. Next, we're going to create a little wire detail on the side here. So just bring the wire through the side. And once again, the frame should be quite light and airy. So just, again, this is just a sort of embellishment detail. You don't actually have to do this. You could cut the wire off as well if you don't like this to be there. So just adjust it until you're satisfied with the look. There you go. And then obviously attach it somewhere on the frame where you can still find an open area. So I'm actually going to, before I do that, bring it in line with the other wire at the bottom, because what we need to do, you can see the stone, well, in my design anyway, is slightly exposed on the side, so I want to cover that up. So if your setting doesn't look like that, you don't have to do this. I'm just doing it because I want to protect the stone on the side, so I'm bringing in those wires and I'm creating a 2x5 weave. So again, cut wire if you need to, or reuse what you have. As always, 100 centimeters is more than enough. Simple 2x5. So you can see I use my fingers to adjust the weave, and but pliers are actually better because it gives you more leverage. Especially the bent nose pliers work well for this sort of thing. So 2x5, and just continue until you've got enough. So I've got about 8 sets, which was enough in this instance to cover the edge of my stone. So I'm just going to fold it up and around, and just so that the exposed area of the stone is protected. As I said, if your stone doesn't have this, you don't have to do this. So I'm just trimming off the ends, and I'm going to, out of shot again, sorry about that. And I'm just going to hook it through somewhere on the frame I can still attach the wires to. There we go. Again, be careful not to distort the frame too much when putting wire through like that. This is what it looks like. So then I just adjust and make sure everything is attached nicely. And always when you cut wires off, just make sure that they're trimmed off in such a way that they point to somewhere inside the frame, because obviously you do not want, you know, when you're wearing a piece, it gets snagged in your clothing, or on anything else. Could ruin a beautiful jumper like that, and also distort, you know, the pendant. So just make sure when you're tucking wires off, when you're trimming them off, tuck them away so that they're not exposed. There you go. So it kind of rolls them in, and now they don't snag on anything. So just adjust where the weave is sitting, and that is the side nicely covered. Although the back isn't all that beautiful, but it's covered. So that's what it looks like, and this is one of my fun things to do. So if you don't have a drill like this, you can use a little tool, which is, I think they call it an Archimedes drill, which is sort of a handheld little device that achieves the same thing. Obviously, if you have a drill with a chuck like this, you can do it very quickly. If not, you can even just twist it with wire, with pliers. But this right there is why I like square wire, because you can give it a lot of detail and intricacy with just a little bit of shaping and twisting. So next we're going to lay this detail somewhere on the side. I didn't like it the way it was the first time, so I'm bringing it in closer to the center of the frame. So once it's twisted, it becomes a little bit less easier to work with, because it's obviously work hardened, so it's a little bit more stiff than it would be without. So just adjust until you're happy. And that's what it looks like. And then obviously attach the wire to the frame at the back somewhere. I don't think I could decide what I wanted to do with this, so I'm just going to feed it somewhere near the frame. Obviously, when you're attaching wires like that, and you know they do not want to go through the framer, so it's quite easily done to pull too hard, and the wires will then slip through and unfortunately distort the whole sort of shape you have created at the front. So what I tend to do, what I've learned the hard way over the years, is before I pull any wire through, I usually put my thumb over the wire where I don't want it to move from, if that makes any sense. Oh, there we go, I've attached it now. Wanted to spare you the agony of watching me attach it. So I've cut to that. All right, so then once you've attached it, you kind of roll it in, and as always, kind of hide the sharp ends and make sure they don't stick out. So there you go. So just attach. That's what it looks like so far. There we go. See, that's that wire I meant in the beginning, the half round wire that I've kept all the way through the design, which I ended up cutting off anyway. I mean, you could maybe wrap it around one of the square wires and create some detail with, perhaps. But yeah, I just cut it off. So next we're going to use the one wire on the left to create a little bit of detail. Once again, personal preference, you don't have to do this. This is just some added texture to the pendant. And I'm going to trim off because we don't need the whole length. Feed it through the frame. And then just attach. That's what it looks like so far. So obviously you can always attach. That's the pendant so far. So again, this is feeding the wire near the frame again somewhere. And as you can see, I'm trying my hardest not to pull too hard. And I'm just wrapping it once around, which is enough because obviously there's any load bearing on any of the wires. So as long as it's just superficially attached, everything should be okay. So just adjust. And that's what it looks like. I think I just ended up cutting off the last wire. Yep, I did that. So I cut it off. And that's all the weaving done. So the last step is to actually add the accent beads on the sides and the prong setting stone. The tutorial for this I've added a link to in the description below. So you can go and have a look and see how to create that setting and then just attach it. I'll show you in a minute what it looks like. So the last step is to add our beads and our accent stone. So for this I've used some 0.6mm wire, purely because it is stronger than your 0.4, and just obviously make sure you attach it to the frame securely so it doesn't come undone. And then, as I said, for the prong setting, I'll attach a link in the comments in the description on how to make this. I just didn't want to make the video too long, so I put the link there. So obviously feed it through the frame and just make sure it's securely attached. And that's that. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to subscribe. And as I mentioned at the beginning, I do have kits for this on my website. So visit imbalicrafts.com to have a look at the variations. And don't forget to visit me on Facebook, Instagram or TikTok. And join our wire wrap and jewelry artists Facebook group as well, because we're a fun bunch and we always have some amazing talent on the page that share their work with all of us. It's just a great place to be, so come and join us. That's it from me, and thank you lots.